Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back into my channel. So in this lesson, we're going to cover the concept of containers. But but the best way to start to do this is to start by talking about physical servers and virtual machine. So years ago, all servers were physical, meaning we didn't have virtual machines, so your files server, web server, database servers were physical. So servers were mounted in a rack somewhere or in a server room, but you had one operating system per server that was highly inefficient. For example, domain controller on average utilize less than 10% of their CPU. So of the CPU. So you simply wasted 90% of the CPU power that you actually paid for because it was all isolated. So that one server and the operating system on it. So we evolved from physical servers to run in multiple virtual machines on a physical server. So here's the physical server image that we used to have. Now we evolved from that. Now we can share storage, memory processing power, and more efficient reduce the need to the number of physical servers because we now have one physical server with the ability to host multiple virtual machines. Now, how many virtual machines depends on your resources. That seems like the height of efficiency at one time. But if you think about it, a virtual machine has a full operating system. So let's say I want this to be a web server. And we'll say a web app or someone that runs some aspects like net application on it. Well, the downside if this a standard web server 2016 operating system, if you had to buy a license, the operating of the operating system, you have to install the entire operating system. It has all the roles and features, all the capability of the operating system itself. But all you want is a web server. So now you can incur the cost of the entire operating system. It consumes a lot of resources, and it has a large footprint on this because it has all the other capabilities that you do not intend to use. Now that will be truly if I'm building a service for any reason, file server, domain controller, they still full operating system. So you have the benefit of using shared hardware, but at the service level, you still have a lot of services. You don't have a need to run on the virtual machine. That's where containers come into play. I think of containers as the evolution of virtual machine. We went from physical to virtual machine. Now we're going to these containers. A containers contains all the all the OS settings and application settings that are actually required. So here in this one container, I could have my web application one on this. I could have another run in this container, and let's say at some like web application. This container here could run some of these MySQL database application. Maybe I have an app that one WordPress that's unique about these containers. They are not full virtual machine. They are smaller than virtual machine. They have a smaller footprint. They consume less resources. So truly, the easy way to think of a container as the application you want to run on it. To run in it, I mean, it has only the required operating system component needed to run the application within it. So it's not a full operating system, just the required components. So kind of going along that model of efficiency from physical to virtual containers are much more efficient than virtual machine when it comes to resources size, those type of things. Now, these are some keys difference. Now, these are some keys difference. So, efficiency. Now, these are some keys difference. We cannot blindly say that you should use containers or sort of virtual machine in your environment you go to. You likely have a need for both. But some of the key differences, isolation, containers provide what Microsoft refers to as lightweight isolation from the host and other containers. But it has a strong security as a virtual machine, so my container does not have access to your container. But something are still shared between the containers themselves. So it's not a full total isolation. If you contrast that with a virtual machine can be completely isolated from one another. They can be isolated from the host operating system itself. So with a virtual machine, you would have to connect through the network to access resources from one virtual machine to another. They are just built to completely isolate themselves, self-contained. So maybe if I'm going to, as I say here, host app for competing companies on the same servers or cluster, virtual machine may be a better solution, not the operating system. If we look at virtual machine run a complete operating system. They have the kernel of the OS. Now, because it's a complete OS, it does consume more resources, CPU, memory, storage, truly a full operating system. You have your application running on it. So that's a traditional virtual machine we've been using for years and years. On the container side, the container runs in user mode of the operating system. It contains just the services we need for the application run. Therefore, it uses fewer resources than our actual typical virtual machine. So it's a little more efficient. The deployment side, we can deploy containers such as Dockers, or is it actually a third party? I mean, application is what that actually is, but it's something that Microsoft has support for starting in 2016 and Windows 10. Now the Docker. Microsoft has supported this concept, but this has been a Linux concept if you want to manage multiple containers. Microsoft has this Azure Kubernetes services, or AKS, is what you often see. This is really Microsoft service to manage multiple containers, kind of a single unit. Basically, guys, if we compare that deployment on the virtual machine side, you deploy individual virtual machine using possibly the Windows Admin Center Hypervisor Manager. Stalker here. Enable developer to host application within a container. A container is standardized. Now let's read a little bit. So these are the differences. These are the features: isolation, operating system deployment, persistent storage, fault tolerance. Now, containers, they typically provide lightweight, isolated from the host on other containers, but does not provide a strong security boundaries as a virtual machine. A virtual machine, it provides a complete isolation from the host operating system and other VM. This is useful when a strong security boundary is critical, but as hosting app, the complete companies on the same server or cluster. Now, you could go over all the differences yourself, like I said. So an Azure Containers instance, it's a platform as service. It's fast run. It's fast startup time. It uses public IP connectivity and DNS name, hypervisor level security, isolation feature, custom size, persist storage, Linux and Linux and Windows containers. So they go container and the web, the DNS name, and IP address. So it's a collection of containers that get scheduled on the same host. The container in the group share a life cycle resources, local, network, and storage volume. Now Docker here, so it's enable developers to host application within a container. A container is a standardized unit of software that contains everything required for an application to run. Available on both Linux and Windows Microsoft, and can be hosted on Azure http://herbdocker.com, this website. So Kubernetes, AKS, just like I was saying, AKS core concepts for Azure Kubernetes services. As application developer moves towards a container-based approach, the need to orchestrate it and manage resources is important. Kubernetes is the leading platform. Let me fixing this. So guys, it's just So Kubernetes, let me see if I can close this. Okay, Kubernetes is the leading platform that provides the ability to provide reliable scheduling of fault-tolerant application workloads. So Azure Kubernetes Services, AKS, is a managed Kubernetes offering that further simplifies container-based application deployment and management. Now, what is Kubernetes? Kubernetes is a rapid evolving platform that manages containers-based. I tell you what, let's just finish with the Docker and I'll touch the Kubernetes later. Now, let's switch back into this. Now, by the way, let's just go back to home here. Before we go and do any demo, see if I can erase this real quick. Say that. Let's see if we can erase this real quick. And okay, guys. Now, if I were to switch to the Docker website, say here, and let's switch to Docker. Now, if you go and explore, so you could see that as we speak right now, they have about 9,268,526 images, anywhere from Alpine, NGINX, BusyBox, Ubuntu, Python, Redis, PostgreSQL, Node, HTTPD, Mongo, MySQL, Memcache, so on, MariaDB, Dockers, and everything, and so on and so on. So let's say if I were to type IIS and hit enter, you can see they have here like Windows IIS undefined. So as we speak, there's about 1,837 results just for that. Anywhere from nano servers, which one of those that usually use with Microsoft, so on and so on. Now, if you type WordPress, so you could see here, there's about 10,000 results just for WordPress. Anywhere from WordPress, from Bitmani WordPress, and GINX, and so on and so on. So this is pretty neat and user-friendly. See, multi-container WordPress, that's within Microsoft, by Microsoft, to Azure Doc app and stuff like that. Now, as we talk already about Docker, so I don't think there's a need to talk about that again. So, but just real quick, too, Docker is an open platform for developing, shipping, and running applications. Docker enables you to separate your application from your infrastructure so you can deliver software quickly. With Docker, you can manage your infrastructure in the same way you manage your application. By taking advantage of Docker's methodologies for shipping, testing, and deploying code quickly, you can significantly reduce the delay between written code and running in its production. Running in production. So you go to the Docker platform, it explained that. You could visit that yourself, the overview. So what can you do with Docker? What can I use Docker for? So it have everything here. You could, for CI/CD especially, say Docker streamlines for development lifecycle by allowing developers to work in standardized environment using local containers which provide your application and services. Containers are great for continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD workflow. So, again, you could take a look at this yourself. So there go a Docker architecture. It shows the client, Docker run, Docker build, and Docker pull. It has Docker host, the Docker daemon, images, Python, Redis, and engine. So everything here is containers, registry, and everything, guys, plugins. So again, this is a pretty interesting website. You could visit that and learn about it yourself, because you may have some questions come up on interviews that you would have to answer. Now, let's switch into the portal here. Let's go ahead and just refresh this. And now let me see. If I go here, how do I still have that here? Okay, so I'm not sure. Now, if you go to resource group, okay, there go resource group right there. Now, if you look here, you would see that I want to make sure that I erase everything. If I could, why not? Under the subscription, bang, bang, bang. Okay, so let's switch into the portal and start. Let's switch into the now you see on the resource group, it looks like I have just one resource group, but when I clicked over there, I've seen multiple resource group, which probably being the resource group that have been created. But see if I can erase these two. Now let's go to containers. As you can tell, I have no container yet. So, and resource group, I have a few, but I can delete these because I don't need them. I want to start. Now, if I would switch, hold up, let me see if I can erase these. Not sure. Okay. So storage was created. Don't really need the storage source. And then agile. Okay, guys. So if I want to, I could pull this and I could type in connect. That's the Azure, that's the PowerShell with Azure. So say AZ account. Let's go in my account here. Okay, so maybe it's because I was already in. Now I can create a resource group right from there. Say if I type in new, sorry. So new dash AZ, does it give it to me? So new dot AZ resource, resource group, And let's type the name of a resource group, which is RG1. Oh, sorry, RG1. And I want this to be on the East US. So let's say East US. And let's see. Okay, so you see it says that now the resource group name is RG1, which is the name I give you, the location I put it, which is on East US, and the provisioning state is succeeded. It means that it's been created, and the resource group ID and everything, stuff like that. So let's switch over there. And if I go to resource group, now I may need to refresh this a little bit so I can see the RG1 resource group I just created. So it's not coming up yet. Might take some time. Let me just go back out. And let me refresh. So it might take some time. I just created it, so I may need to give it some time before it shows there. Now, by the way, I don't want this resource group, so that's why I'm trying to remove this out of there. So I passed too many commands with this. West sales emir. Now let's see if the resource group that we create is already shows here. Let's go to resource group. So there we go. Our resource group is right there. It's the resource group we just created. If we switch back over, so we created here. Now I can continue with making pull Docker images from the Azure, PowerShell, but I prefer it with the whole generic way. Just use the portal and do that. So let's say if I would type WordPress. Say WordPress. Okay, so let's back home so we can to be on the safe side. Let's type in WordPress. So there go WordPress right there. So let's create a WordPress. Let's put it on the resource group. Let's give it a name. I would call this WordPress Linux site. And I can leave these as default. I can give it a username. Call it call. Give it a password. Then confirm the password. And now I could click next. Not worry too much about these. Next. It have a virtual network, a subnet by default. If you want to, you could manage this and make this the way you want. I can make sure I hit that because I'm just doing this for the sake of this. Afterwards, I will delete it. Now, next, I don't really need to change nothing here. Now with that, I don't want it to be too heavy, so I will not go book diagnostic. So let's go ahead and create this. I'll review and create, see if it passed the validation test. Now it passed it, so let's go ahead and create. Now, it's just It's just deploying. So you may wonder, okay, so now it's already okay, guys. So all you want right now is just go to resources. And if you will grab the public IP address of this, and if you were to go open up a browser and just paste this. Now, if you were to ask, like, what can I use WordPress? So there we go. What can I use WordPress on Azure? So WordPress can be used on a few different Azure services, aka virtual machine and app services. For a full list of WordPress options on Azure, you could see WordPress on Azure. Now, if your question is Azure is a good hosting for WordPress, Azure enables you to easily scale your web, app, and database to ensure consistent performance. Performance Azure Global Network of data center ensure low latency and fast load time for visitors from around the world. Now, how do I add WordPress in Azure? This is just how I do it. Now, that's what you will just need to add into your developers so they can continue with whatever that they are doing as per the side of this job. Now, let's say if we will want to build a container instance, now we could go here and hit create container instance. Let's put it on the resource group that we created with the PowerShell. Let's call this instance. Let's call it my container. And we could leave everything else as default. The image source can be a quick start image. You could leave this public. Now, if you read here, it says that choose between the three networking option for your container instance. Public will create a public IP address for your container services. Private will allow you to choose a new or an existing virtual network for your container instance. This is not yet available for Windows containers. So it kind of explains everything to you. Now, when it's come to the DNS, you got to give this a DNS name. Now, I will call this my container because this is the name I give that. Now, you could choose any tenants that you want for the DNS. But, you could choose any DNS label name scope, but I choose tenant for, there's tenant, subscription, resource group, and not reusable or any reusable and stuff like that. I can leave everything else as default. So they are TCP, port 80, which is HTTP. You could add either HTTPS here if you want to. You could just make this be HTTPS. No, I'm sorry. So all I had to do is just put the port number, which is 443. And now you see, and you could have add TCP here and just review and create, but I don't really need that. So I will just leave this as default. For my instance can be accessed with anybody, like from HTTPS and HTTP. So let's just go ahead and review and create. Oh, you could hit advanced. I can leave everything else as default. Let's say we start policy on failure. You could put it on always or never, or if you don't never want it, I mean your containers to be we start, and I could leave mine's on failure, because I mean this one is by default, because what I'm doing is I'm just creating this instance, this Docker instance by default. I really waste that as soon as I'm done with this demo simulation, because I don't want to get charged. Now it says Microsoft Manage Keys, which is MMK. I'll leave that here, but you could choose customs if you want to. And you would have to continue, select a key vault, which I've done key vault on previous demonstration before. So I'll leave this as default. Now you could give it a tag name if you want to, and a value. That's not really too much of a big deal. You could, but I mean, I will just create, review and create. Now it passed the validation test. Let's just go ahead and create it. Now, you may wonder, what is containers? So I mean, so containers known as bundle an application's code together with the related configuration files and libraries, and with the dependencies required for the app to run. This allows developers and IT pros to deploy applications seamlessly across environment. So let's go ahead and go to resource. And so what I wanted to do, so you see the fully qualified domain name here, which is my domain name that I gave it. I can just copy this, and I could show you the power of a container. I could open a new browser and just paste this and hit enter. Now you see how it says, welcome to Azure Container Instances. So I have a fully Docker container, and it's available online. So Docker is a popular container management and imaging platform that allows you to quickly work with containers on Linux and Windows, guys. Now, again, I already answered this question, but if you want to, you may still wonder, what is container versus virtual machine? Containers themselves don't move. Instead of an orchestrator can automatically start or stop containers on cluster nodes to manage changes in load and availability. Now, VM can fail over to another server in a cluster. With the virtual machine operating system, we're starting on the new server. Now, guys, again, I appreciate you guys will follow along with me. Stay tuned for another lab with Kubernetes. And again, so we kind of create, in this demo, we kind of create, we talk about, first of all, we talk about virtual machine on this here. We talk about virtual machine and containers. There go the comparisons right there. We use the PowerShell. We create a resource group. We could have done what we did here, create instances and attach workload. Attach workload with containers from the PowerShell, but we just use the portal just to make it easier. So we create a container and we attach the WordPress site, and there was the demonstration of both of them. So all your developer got to do now, if you were to give them that, they would hit continue, and they would actually, make their website and do whatever they want with this. As you finish with that, you will just hand that over with to your developers. I appreciate you guys. Stay tuned for another lab. See you soon. Bye-bye.